A Delta Airlines flight was forced to make an emergency landing after one of its engines caught fire. A witness shot video capturing the moment on Friday just after the Atlanta-bound flight took off from Los Angeles.
A Boeing 767 recently experienced a serious incident while carrying 235 passengers, suddenly catching fire in one engine midair and being forced to make an emergency landing in a breathless situation. Upon landing, the airport area was immediately sealed off by security forces, with dozens of fire trucks and special emergency vehicles deployed in an unprecedented state of chaos. This incident once again rings alarm bells about Boeing, a name already drowning in crisis after a series of shocking aviation accidents, all involving aircraft manufactured by this company. What exactly happened turning a modern aircraft into a floating ball of fire above the clouds? And in the end, is Boeing still a symbol of advanced flight technology? Or has it become a deadly omen, hanging above passengers around the world? According to information from the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, FAA flight number DL4476, with 226 passengers and 9 crew members, took off from Los Angeles Airport at 1:23 p.m. on July 18th, scheduled to arrive at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta. However, just a few minutes after takeoff, the left engine of the Boeing 767-400 suddenly burst into intense flames, forcing the crew to initiate emergency procedures to return to LAX and land at 2:06 p.m. The entire harrowing moment was captured in a video posted on the YouTube channel LA Flights, showing flames erupting from the left wing just seconds after leaving the runway. The cameraman could not hold back and exclaimed, "This situation is truly dangerous." As soon as the plane touched down, a swarm of fire trucks and rescue equipment quickly surrounded the scene to conduct urgent inspection and respond to the risk of escalation. Fortunately, no injuries were reported. However, experts stated this: Boeing 767 returned to the ground in a condition that was nearly on the edge of catastrophe. If the fire had penetrated just a few meters deeper into the engine compartment, or if a piece of molten metal had pierced the fuel tank, or merely a few seconds of delay in landing operations, the entire aircraft could have turned into a fireball, crashing straight into the residential area south of Los Angeles. A national-level aviation disaster, with hundreds of lives lost and thousands watching from the ground, could have unfolded. This incident once again raises widespread concern about the safety of aging aircraft models like the Boeing 767, machines that have served for many years and are now showing signs of fatigue. In the context of the U.S. aviation industry facing mounting pressure due to delayed maintenance and a post-pandemic shortage of engineers, the Delta incident has become a focal point, not only for the public but also for regulatory authorities. Just hours after the incident, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration (FAA) immediately launched a comprehensive investigation. Although the aircraft had landed safely, the severity of the fire left authorities with no time to wait. Even before technical reports were released, a former employee who worked at Delta's Flight Operations Center revealed surprising information. According to this source, the flight crew of DL446 had detected abnormal data from the engine pressure system during the startup phase at the boarding gate. Specifically, the left combustion chamber's heat sensor showed fluctuations exceeding the recommended threshold for a few brief seconds, enough for the captain to request a manual inspection. However, less than 10 minutes later, the cockpit received a message from the Technical Control Center stable within limits. Proceed with the flight. The issue wasn't mechanical, it was timing. DL446 was part of a high-frequency flight rotation between Los Angeles and Atlanta, Delta's golden route during weekends. Delays or cancellations would disrupt the entire schedule of Delta's 767 fleet across the U.S. According to Flight Radar 24 data, each 767 jet often operates 4 to 5 flights per day, with turnaround times between landings and takeoffs, sometimes under just 70 minutes. Another investigative track, currently kept under wraps by the FAA, has started to reveal alarming details. According to sources from airport security, the engine fire on flight DL446 may not have been caused solely by mechanical failure. Security cameras at maintenance area number 12, where the Boeing 767-400 had been parked overnight before departure, are being reviewed frame by frame. A night shift technician stated they saw an unfamiliar individual approach the left engine compartment around 3 a.m., outside the standard inspection schedule and not listed on the duty roster. This person remained near the engine area for about 7 minutes, leaving no recorded actions in the digital maintenance log, and then disappeared. Some technical experts do not rule out the possibility of a sophisticated insertion, such as a miniature heat emitter or a counterfeit sensor cluster intentionally embedded into the engine system to trigger a deliberate overheating. These types of devices, if installed precisely and cleverly concealed, can deceive real monitoring sensors and initiate a faulty chain reaction in the fuel control or pressure management systems. They are small enough to evade visual inspections, but dangerous enough to ignite the combustion chamber when the engine is under power. The FBI has now officially joined the investigation. The question is no longer, what kind of device caused the fire, but rather, who put it there? Was it an internal technician, a passenger with access to the maintenance area, or someone hired to send a message? Meanwhile, technical hypotheses have also surfaced. Suspicion is focused on the combustion chamber and fuel system 2 zones that have repeatedly appeared in Boeing's internal warnings, but have never been fully addressed. Several independent engineers believe the incident may have originated from misaligned combustion cycles, leading to excess heat and fire breaching into the thermal barrier. What's more alarming, this is not the first time CF6 engines on Boeing 767s have been suspected of weaknesses in this exact section. Initial analysis from the technical investigation team identified an anomaly at the bearing cluster behind the combustion chamber, a part Boeing previously warned might suffer from micro-level metal fractures and required regular maintenance. Yet, instead of issuing a mandatory recall or replacing parts across the older fleets, Boeing merely released non-compulsory technical guidance. This raises a critical question. How many airlines opted to cut costs instead of replacing the components on time? Worse still, the fire warning and thermal control systems on Boeing 767s continue to use an outdated design lacking full integration with modern sensors. This leads to delayed fire detection inside the engine just a few seconds, but enough for disaster to unfold. There had been an internal proposal to upgrade the sensors and thermal control systems, but Boeing declined to implement it, citing cost and lack of immediate necessity. Another investigative path is being pursued by the FAA with particular urgency, the possibility of mechanical failure originating inside the GE CF6 engine, specifically in the fan blades, or the high-speed bearing assembly. This is the same engine model that has accompanied the Boeing 767 fleet for decades and has also been repeatedly named in serious incidents involving overheating blade fractures and loss of combustion control. According to engineers who directly examined the scene, there are signs that irregularities had already formed in the rotating shaft and fan section prior to takeoff, with a high possibility that one blade had either cracked or shifted off its technical axis. During the maximum thrust phase at takeoff, centrifugal force could have caused the damaged component to detach, collide with the engine wall, and generate friction, triggering the ignition. One factor that cannot be ignored: the aircraft's age. Although the airline has not released exact figures, tracking data shows that most active Boeing 767-400 aircraft have surpassed 20 years in service. And when a mechanical system is stretched to the limits of its lifespan, even the smallest deviation in maintenance, whether due to negligence, budget cuts, or a simple human mistake, can become the fuse for disaster. What's more concerning is that Boeing had repeatedly received internal warnings urging a revision of routine inspection protocols for CF-6 engines, especially when mounted on aging airframes. Yet to this day, no comprehensive recall program has been enforced. Meanwhile, airlines still recovering from the economic blows of the pandemic continue to operate. Aging fleets delay new aircraft acquisitions and rely on just enough maintenance rather than proactive upgrades. But to fully understand how dangerous the situation has become, one must examine the aircraft at the center of this incident. First introduced in 1981, the Boeing 767 was once hailed as a revolution in aviation, featuring a wide-body frame, twin-jet engines, and Boeing's first digital cockpit. But that glory has faded into history nearly half a century ago. Today, most 767s still flying have been in service for 20 to over 30 years, a number that makes even seasoned maintenance engineers uneasy. Boeing officially ended the production line for the passenger version of the 767 in 2014, not because market demand had dried up, but because the technological limits of this aircraft model no longer met modern safety and performance standards. Yet, instead of retiring the aging fleet, many airlines, including Delta, the operator of the 767, involved in the Los Angeles incident, have continued to fly this model as a cost-saving choice. The commonly cited reasons: low depreciation, cost-reliable payload capacity, and most of all, the shortage of new aircraft supply after COVID-19. But behind that seemingly rational financial calculation lies a decision filled with risk, keeping an aging machine in the sky where every bolt, every weld, every turbine blade has undergone thousands of flight cycles, and the likelihood of failure only increases with every flight hour. What's even harder to accept, not only has Boeing delayed upgrading technical standards, but even airlines like Delta, those who know their fleet history, best have continued to gamble flying 767s that have far exceeded ideal safety thresholds. Looking back at history, the Boeing 767 has no shortage of blood-stained trails across the sky, and the horrific crash of Lauda Air in 1991 stands as one of its earliest warnings. That year, a Boeing 767-300 operating flight 004 for Lauda Air plunged straight into the mountains of Thailand just minutes after takeoff, killing all 223 people on board. The cause was identified: the thrust reverser system on one engine had suddenly deployed mid-flight, a scenario that should never happen. Thrust reversers are only supposed to engage after landing to redirect engine thrust and slow the aircraft. But in this case, the system deployed mid-air, causing the two engines to produce opposing forces, leading the aircraft to lose stability and plummet within seconds. What sparked public outrage? Boeing had previously been warned that the thrust reverser system could mistakenly activate at the wrong time, but the company assessed the risk as extremely rare and took no mandatory corrective action. The aircraft continued to be produced and delivered to commercial airlines until 223 lives became the first line in a grim statistic. The crash of Lauda Air 004 was not just a tragedy, it was an alarm bell that if root flaws weren't addressed, the Boeing 767 could become a deadly weapon in the hands of its own crew. And tragically, it wasn't the last time. In April 2002, a Boeing 767-200 operating flight 129 for Air China crashed while approaching Gimhae Airport in Busan, South Korea in dense fog conditions with near zero visibility. The plane struck a hillside just a few kilometers from the runway, killing 129 of the 166 people on board. The official cause was determined to be a failure in crew coordination under extremely low visibility conditions, combined with the absence of an enhanced ground proximity warning system (EGPWS), a device that had already become standard on many modern aircraft of the same era. What drew public concern was the fact that at the time, the Boeing 767-200 was still widely used in commercial service, yet it did not come equipped with these essential safety technologies by default. The 767's cockpit was deemed outdated, relying on analog systems and lacking integration with modern navigation and warning technologies. A glaring gap between technological standards and passenger lives. And by now, what were once considered isolated accidents had turned into a string of warnings pointing to a deeper systemic problem. Not just human error, not just bad weather, but a design and operational blind spot left unaddressed for far too long and rarely spoken aloud. These were technical and operational gaps that had existed for many years, documented, warned about, but never fully addressed. Before the Delta 767's engine ignited over the skies of Los Angeles, many aviation engineers had already issued warnings. This aircraft carried far too many underlying risks, and Boeing had known that for a long time. At the root of the issue lies the GE CF6 engine, a model installed on most Boeing 767 variants for over 4 decades. According to data from the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, between 1997 and 2022 alone, this engine series was linked to at least 72 major incidents. These included 19 engine fires, 11 in-flight fan blade fractures at cruising altitude, and dozens of serious fuel leaks classified as high risk. These numbers were not rare anomalies. They were clear alarm bells. An internal General Electric report from 2018 noted structural deformation and abnormal overheating in the combustion chambers of several CF6 engine batches. More concerning, the actual service life of these chambers was nearly 25% shorter than their original design specification. But instead of launching a comprehensive replacement campaign, Boeing chose the familiar route, issuing a non-mandatory technical bulletin. There was no recall, no enforced inspection protocol. Airlines that wanted to repair could do so. Those that didn't kept flying as usual. The danger was only amplified by another persistent weakness. Most Boeing 767s still operate with electrical and cockpit systems based on 1980s analog design. With such outdated infrastructure, integrating modern sensors or real-time engine monitoring systems is nearly impossible. Flight crews cannot detect early warning signs, and in most cases, they only become aware of the problem when the alarm goes off, when pressure has already dropped, or when flames have reached the combustion chamber. By that time, it's already too late. Boeing has no shortage of data. They issued multiple service bulletins to airlines, operating the 767 listing in detail, a series of serious technical flaws, from flap misalignment, causing severe vibrations during landing, to corrosion at the engine wing attachment points where even a small crack could lead to the entire engine detaching mid-flight. The greatest concern lies at the junction between the fuselage and the wings, the area under the most structural stress across the entire airframe. Technical reports from Japan and Europe had previously documented cracks forming in this zone on 767s that had surpassed 25 years of service. If these fractures go undetected, the possibility of a wing failure at high altitude is entirely real. Despite such evidence, Boeing has never mandated routine ultrasonic inspections or enforced any compulsory part replacements. Most of the warnings, sent even those based on specific data and verified incidents, were only framed as recommendations. There were no binding technical directives, no enforced manufacturer action. And while Boeing remained silent, many airlines opted for the simplest path. As long as the plane could still take off, they would not intervene. When the Delta Airlines Boeing 767-400 caught fire mid-air, public outrage quickly turned toward Boeing. But parallel to that outrage lies a colder, seldom acknowledged truth. Many airlines, including major names like Delta, continue to operate this aircraft, not because they believe it's safe, but because the financial benefits are simply too great to walk away from. The bitter reality is the Boeing 767 is not kept for safety, but for profit. Aircraft that have been fully depreciated become money printers, no debts left to pay. yet still carrying hundreds of passengers each day at minimal cost. No one wants to give up an asset that generates almost pure cash flow. But when that asset carries a 30-year-old fuselage engines that have been flagged for fire risk and a monitoring system incapable of early warning, then that profit equation is no longer a strategy, it is a gamble. And the passengers are the ones being placed on the betting table. The shortage of new aircraft supply has only elevated the 767 status as a strategic asset. Boeing and Airbus are both behind schedule on deliveries. Waiting lists for models like the 787 or A350 stretch from 12 to 36 months. In that window, airlines have only two options: retire aging fleets and forfeit revenue, or keep them flying, betting that nothing will go wrong. And it isn't hard to guess which choice they've made. But that decision is putting passengers at extreme risk. The 767s flying today, no matter how thoroughly they're inspected, are operating under undeniable physical limitations. Many components have exceeded their intended service life. The airframe has endured structural stress over tens of thousands of flight hours. Meanwhile, the electronic warning systems still belong to a technical generation nearly 3 decades old. And the most fundamental issue lies here. Not every airline invests adequately in maintenance. In real-world operations, many carriers under financial pressure have shortened inspection procedures, delayed replacement of non-mandatory components, or performed only the minimum repairs needed to keep the plane flying. Technical service bulletins from Boeing, which are merely advisory, are often ranked below cost factors, flight hours, and commercial schedules. The question is no longer, is it dangerous? But rather, is it worth grounding a plane for a part that hasn't failed yet? And in most cases, the answer is not yet. The incident involving flight DL446 is only the visible tip of a much larger iceberg. Hundreds of Boeing 767s continue to take off every day around the globe, carrying not just passengers, but hidden risks wrapped inside aging aluminum structures. Delta is not the only airline. They were simply the first to experience a 767 failure this year. Flight DL446 nearly became a national catastrophe. But what's more chilling is that there was nothing surprising about this incident. From the aging fuselage, the repeatedly flagged engine, the outdated avionics to the cost-driven habit of downplaying technical warnings, everything was already in place. The fire didn't erupt because of a random accident. It was ignited by a long chain of wrong decisions. Boeing knew the vulnerabilities of the 767, but failed to act swiftly or decisively. Airlines like Delta kept pushing aging fleets to the limit for financial gain despite technical data full of red flags. Regulatory agencies issued recommendations but lacked the enforcement tools to prevent history from repeating itself. And when the engine explodes, everyone looks at each other in the same familiar silence, just like they did with the 737 MAX 777 and 787. If you find this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to not miss out on exciting content to come. Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for watching. And don't forget, what we share in this video is for reference and analysis from various perspectives. Please combine it with other sources of information for a fuller and more objective view.